Hi there folks, Skulpin140 back for another Transformers review, and today we're going to be taking a look at a Prime figure this time. We're going to be looking at a figure that has been reviewed to death quite a lot of because of the way that this figure has gained some huge popularity. And one of the many problems that I've got with this figure is that it's not really what it should be, and it should be something else. Today we're going to take a look at, as the title above will probably tell you, Prime Robots in Disguise Wheeljack. Now, the one thing that I've got a problem with in this figure is that this doesn't really feel like Wheeljack. The character doesn't feel like Wheeljack, and the figure is nice, don't get me wrong, the figure is perfect in almost every way. It's just the character doesn't really feel like Wheeljack. Wheeljack was always a mad scientist that would make any new invention that would come along. This isn't Wheeljack, this is just something completely different. But we'll get onto that later on. As in terms of appearances and personality and bio or not for this one character, Wheeljack hasn't really done a whole lot, because he's only had one appearance. And when this character appears in more episodes of Prime, I'm not going to go ahead and redo this review just because of those appearances, so we're just going to steamroller on. Wheeljack in Prime. Wheeljack is a member of a group known as the Wreckers, alongside Bulkhead. Him and Bulkhead are very old friends, and Bulkhead often calls him Jackie for short, which is weird, because Jackie is a girl's name. Not sure why you'd name a male character after a girl, but whatever, it's a cartoon. It's not meant to make sense. But Prime Wheeljack is that he's a very tough, very snarky, kind of very full of himself character. Something that Wheeljack has never been, which I think is kind of weird. Wheeljack first shows up in the episode Con Job, where, making his way to Earth, gets hijacked by the Decepticons and then is kidnapped, and then the Decepticon character Makeshift assumes the look of Wheeljack, the personality of Wheeljack, to just lure himself into the Autobot base to reel the Autobots out. And after Makeshift is found out by the Autobots, especially Bulkhead, Makeshift covers blown, and then he pretty much has to get away. So then Wheeljack comes along and pretty much makes a name for himself by using his two swords, and just plows his way through the Decepticons as much as possible. And though the Autobots pretty much welcomed Wheeljack into the group, he pretty much he is intended to return to space, and he invited Bulkhead along, but at the same time Bulkhead is attached to the Earth, so there you go. And Bulkhead was sure that Wheeljack will return someday. Hasn't happened yet, but it will probably happen at some point. Now, one thing as well which kind of makes this character different from Wheeljack is that he's voiced by James Horan, giving this very snarky, kind of really in-your-face personality voice, which isn't something that Wheeljack is known for. But again, I don't think that this one personality for Wheeljack doesn't work, but there you go. But that's pretty much Wheeljack's role in Prime at the moment. He hasn't appeared in other episodes at the moment, but when he does, that might actually draw some attention to him, and hopefully might draw close to who Wheeljack really is. So anyway, now that I've rambled on a bit about his bio, and the appearances that he's had, as short as they are, we're going to talk a little bit about the toy, and see some of the good things about this toy, and some of the bad things. So without any further ado, let's go take a look. So here we have Prime Wheeljack in his alt mode. As you can clearly see, his alt mode is rather different from what Wheeljack was in G1, in that his alt mode in G1 was always a Lancia Stratos, whereas this time his alt mode is more of a mixture between of a Ferrari Testarossa and a Ford GT90, which worked very well for Wheeljack. But the thing is, though, and I said this about Wheeljack's bio, in that this toy being so much different from what Wheeljack was, and his personality being so much different from what Wheeljack was, they should have given this figure a different colour and a different head sculpt, called it Drift and be done with it, because this really doesn't feel like Wheeljack, right down to the personality. In fact, I think it was TF Knowles who said that this figure would work very well for either Drift or Blur. In fact, you could almost see this character coloured blue, replace the swords with guns and different head sculpt, and call this figure Blur, and it would work so well, I think. Hopefully sometime in the future Hasbro might take this figure and give it a different colour scheme as either Drift or Blur. You never know. So anyway, yes, the alt mode is in fact very, very nice. This alt mode is very well detailed and very well coloured. The colours, of course, are another loose homage to Wheeljack. You can see the red and the bits of green and the whole thing just being white. It works very well. A nice homage to the original G1 Wheeljack. And of course, right down to the spoiler, the mold is just perfect. It's a perfect looking alt mode. And of course the toy can roll very, very well depending on which surface you have. And the alt mode of course hides the robot mode very well. There's not a little bit of robot mode being revealed at the bottom or at the top, so it looks really, really good. This figure is very smooth and very majestic and just very nice in the panels. Now onto the swords, which are a big thing for this toy to feature. The swords are very nicely sculpted, very well painted. They're very samurai-ish looking swords. And on the blades, you can see tiny writing right there, some sort of Cybertronian runes, which is hard to see, but they're there nonetheless. Same on this one. You get the feeling that whoever designed this toy had a lot of hard time trying to get such tiny writing onto these blades. So I think they work quite nicely. And regarding the swords and the alt mode as well, you can either have the swords either on the sides, where you can see two holes right there, or you can have these swords being featured at the bottom of the alt mode as a sort of attack mode, which, hang on, let me just get these guys out, which looks kind of cool. In fact, it looks more like Wheeljack would be better off mowing cars off the road as well as mowing people off the pavement, which is exactly what this attack mode is meant for. Use the attack mode to whatever best, I think. It looks very nice, in fact. Now, transforming this toy really isn't all that hard, but let's just take off these guys first of all. Transforming this toy, all we need to do is just pull out the arms, and with those arms, just rotate these pieces around, which will reveal the hands for the robot mode. And the legs, of course, push the waist down. And regarding the legs as well, both these legs have a mechanism which you can lift these parts up and slot them in, and push those parts and move them out, as well as the feet. Same with this one as well, to make sure that they look nice and snug. And of course, one thing as well regarding the chest, you want to just push that down, and then it'll reveal the robot head. And of course, you want to make sure that the chest aligns itself perfectly with these holes in the body. There we go. And of course, finally pull out the wings. And finally, here is his robot mode. And I said before this figure would work well for drift, and it does. And it works well for blur as well. But at the same time, this robot mode feels and looks a bit too stonking to be anything related to drift or blur. But let's look at the head sculpt first of all. Right away, I can see why this figure is perfect for being what it is, in that the head sculpt is very much like Wheeljack, right down to the flashing light ears. Now, in the show, of course, Wheeljack didn't actually have his faceplate on, except only just as an attack mode. He actually had a mouth. It's a shame that this figure doesn't come with a changeable head with a mouth, but what are you going to do? Of course, this figure, the head is very well designed. The head is on a ball joint, so it can nod up and down and can rotate the full 360. And you can see at the back it has some light piping, which is quite nice. So this figure, of course, is actually very nice. It has a great lot added to it to make it look a little bit more like Wheeljack. And of course, these wings right here, which don't really do anything, they're just meant to say, hey, this is Wheeljack. Sadly, the one thing about this figure, though, is that this figure suffers from gorilla arm syndrome, in that the arms often appear too long, unrealistically shapen, and just look a bit silly, but I guess they're fine. They're not perfect, but of course, gorilla arms are quite commonplace in a lot of Transformers toys, like animated Soundwave, so this isn't the first time this has happened. But in terms of articulation, the arms can pivot in and out. There's a pivoting mechanism right there, and of course the arms can rotate the full 360, and elbows are quite nice, and knees, the legs can move whichever way you want to, and the knee joints are quite stiff, with nice clicking noise. And you can have this guy doing all sorts of poses, because he is quite poseable. He has got a lot of joints. You could have the swords resting in his hands, and the hands, of course, are in this gripping position. So, there we are. And this is the exact opposite of what Wheeljack would look like. This is drift written all over. This is a very drift-like looking Transformer, and rightfully so. But this is Drift. Drift. I got Drift on my brain. I got Wheeljack in his pose, one of the many poses you can have him in. So final thought on this figure is, it's a perfect figure. It's perfect in every way, right down to the alt mode. The alt mode is perfectly detailed, very well sculpted, and very tightly packed. The robot mode is nice, despite the gorilla arms, and it just looks like a really good toy. But at the same time, though, I still feel like this toy should have been called Drift or Blur, because this character is not Wheeljack, and this toy isn't Wheeljack. But sadly, what are you gonna do? Hopefully in the future we'll see a Drift or Blur redeco coming out of this figure. I want to see that happen though, because it would work much nicer, I think. But you get more for your money that way. But this is a fantastic figure. I recommend it highly. So anyway, this has been Prime Robots in Disguise Wheeljack. I'm Skullgun140. Till then, everybody, see you all next time.